Every night he would leave my bed to rush to his sick mother while I sacrificed 2 unborn children, holding on to the promise of a divorce that never existed. But then the horrifying truth came out. He wasn't going to a hospital. The man I loved was nothing but an illusion, and I found myself trapped in a twisted game with no escape. But the question is, how? How did a high-profile corporate professional manage to lead such a perfect double life for years? How did I, an independent woman, miss every red flag and fall into his psychological trap? And where does this deception finally end? Hey everyone, I'm Sneha. Join me as we peel back the layers of this dark, chilling story hidden beneath the city lights. Let's get into it. 5 years, that's 1,825 days. That is how long I spent trying to build a castle on a foundation made of sand. When you're in your early 20s, time feels infinite. You think you can afford to waste a Tuesday, a month, maybe even a year figuring things out. But in a city like this, whether it's the concrete jungle of New York or the frozen, fast-paced streets of Toronto, time isn't just money. Time is survival. And I was spending mine bleeding out drop by drop for a man who didn't even own a watch. We met in college. It was that classic, intoxicating university romance. He was charming in that dishevelled, effortless way. He was the bohemian soul in a sea of business majors. While the rest of us were stressing over internships and GPA scores, he was playing guitar on the quad, talking about how the system was rigged and how life was meant to be experienced, not managed. At 19, that sounded like freedom. It sounded like poetry. I fell for it. I fell for him hard. They never pushed him, never demanded anything, so he grew up believing that the world would just provide. And for 5 years, the world was me. Living together was supposed to be the start of our life. Instead, it became the beginning of my suffocation. I remember waking up at 6 a.m. every single morning. The alarm would slice through the silence of our small, overpriced apartment. I'd drag myself out of bed, my mind already racing with a to-do list. The subway commute, the 9-hour shift, the groceries, the bills. And there he was, sprawled out in the sheets, deep in a sleep that wouldn't end until noon. He looked peaceful. Innocent almost, but looking at him didn't give me butterflies anymore. It gave me a heavy, sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, like I was staring at a weight I was chained to and the water was rising. He graduated. We both did. But while my graduation cap was the starting gun for the rat race, his was just a souvenir. Months passed, then a year, then 2. The routine became a slow-motion car crash. I would come home after a 10-hour day, my feet throbbing in heels, carrying takeout because I was too tired to cook, and I'd find him exactly where I left him, or close enough. Maybe he'd moved from the bed to the couch. The living room would be bathed in the blue flicker of the TV screen, the sound of video game gunfire filling the air. "Hey, babe," he'd say, not even looking up from the controller. How was work? Work was brutal. Work was fighting for a promotion I needed just to cover our rent. But I wouldn't say that. I'd just sigh, drop my bag and ask the question I asked every day. The question that had become a script in our dying play. I looked at them, he'd say, shrugging. "They're too corporate, Sneha. You know I can't sit in a cubicle. It crushes the soul. I'm waiting for the right opportunity. Something creative. The right opportunity. That phrase haunts me. In North America, opportunities don't knock on your door while you're wearing sweatpants at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. You have to kick the door down." But he didn't want to kick anything down. He wanted to float. And he expected me to be the current that carried him. The resentment didn't happen overnight. It was a slow build-up, like black mould growing behind the wallpaper. It started with the little things. I paid the electricity bill. I paid the internet bill. The internet he used to play games all day. I paid for the groceries. When we went out for dinner, the waiter would bring the check and he wouldn't even reach for his wallet. He'd just keep talking, smiling, completely unbothered, knowing I would silently slide my credit card onto the tray. It wasn't just the money, it was the lack of drive. It was the complete absence of ambition. We were invited to a dinner party by one of my colleagues. Everyone there was moving forward. People were talking about mortgages, about investments, about their 401ks. They were planning vacations to Europe. And there sat my boyfriend wearing a T-shirt that was slightly too old, talking about a level he just beat in a game or a conspiracy theory he read on Reddit. I saw the looks on my friends' faces, that polite, pitying smile. They looked at him like he was a child I had brought along to an adult event. I went to the bathroom that night and cried. I stared at myself in the mirror, my mascara running, and I realised I was ashamed. I was ashamed of the man I loved. And worse, I was ashamed of myself for staying. We cannot survive like this, I told him that night in the Uber ride home. He laughed. He actually laughed. Relax, babe, you worry too much. We're young. Why are you so obsessed with money? I snapped. The driver glanced at us through the rearview mirror, but I didn't care. I am tired. I am tired of carrying both of us. He got quiet then. He gave me that look, the wounded puppy look that used to melt my heart. I'm trying, okay? It's just hard out there. But I did understand. I understood perfectly. He wasn't trying. He was hiding. He was hiding from adulthood, hiding from responsibility, and using my love as his shield. The breaking point didn't come with a bang. It came with a whisper. It was a Sunday. I was sitting at the kitchen table, balancing the budget for the month. Rent had gone up. Again, my student loan payment was due. I was staring at the numbers, realising that I couldn't afford to buy the winter coat I needed because I had to cover his share of the utilities. He walked into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. It was 1 p.m. Babe, he yawned, opening the fridge. We're out of milk. I froze. My pen hovered over the ledger. Can you run down and get some? Just a request. Another demand on my time, my energy, my wallet. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the slump of his shoulders, the lack of urgency in his eyes. I saw a man who was perfectly content to let me drown as long as he stayed dry. And in that moment, the love didn't turn to hate. It turned to ice. It just stopped. No, I said softly. He turned around, confused. No, I said, louder this time. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, a harsh sound in the quiet apartment. I'm not getting the milk. I'm not paying the rent next month. Sneha, what are you talking about? That comment, that dismissive, childish comment was the final nail in the coffin. I'm leaving you, I said. The words tasted like metal, cold and hard. I can't do this. I have a life to live and you are acting like an anchor tied around my neck. He didn't believe me at first. He thought it was just another fight, another ultimatum he could charm his way out of. He tried to hug me, tried to kiss me, tried to pull me back into the comfort of our dysfunction, but I was like a stone. I packed a bag, just the essentials. I told him he had until the end of the month to figure out the lease because my name was coming off it. He asked, his voice cracking. He finally looked scared. For the first time, reality was breaching his bubble. Over a job, over money. I paused at the door. My heart was breaking, shattering into a million pieces. I did love him. God, I loved him so much it hurt to breathe. But I knew that if I stayed, I would hate him eventually, and I would hate myself even more. I do love you, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. But love isn't enough to pay the rent, and it's not enough to build a future. You need to grow up. I walked out into the busy street, the noise of the city washing over me. I felt lightheaded. I felt terrified. I was single, I was heartbroken, and I was alone in a city that eats the weak for breakfast. But as I walked further and further away from that apartment, from the boy on the couch, from the life that was going nowhere, I felt something else. I felt lighter. I told myself I made the right choice. I told myself that he was dead weight and I had just cut the rope. I told myself that one day he would understand. Or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he would move back in with his parents and play video games for the rest of his life. I thought that was the end of his story in my life. I thought I had left him in the rear-view mirror, a tragic chapter of my youth that I would learn from and move past. I was so sure that I was the winner in this breakup. I was the ambitious one. I was the one with the future. I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea that by walking out that door, I hadn't just changed my destiny. I had triggered his and the man I left on that couch. Oh, he wasn't going to stay there, but that is a realisation for another day. At that moment, all I knew was that I was free, or so I thought. Silence, that is the first thing I remember about my life after I walked out. Not the crying, not the loneliness, but the silence. For 5 years, my life had been filled with the background noise of video games, the drone of the television, and the constant nagging voice in my head asking, is this it? But when I moved into my own studio apartment, a shoebox in the city that cost half my paycheck, the silence was deafening. It was terrifying, but it was also clean. I decided right then and there that I wasn't just going to survive this breakup. I was going to win it. I treated my heartbreak like a business project. I buried myself in work while my friends were out swiping on dating apps or crying over glasses of wine. I was at the office until 9:00 p.m. I became the first one to arrive and the last one to leave. I wanted to be so busy, so exhausted that I didn't have the energy to miss him, or worse, to wonder if he was missing me. I blocked him on everything: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I didn't want to know if he was struggling to pay rent. I didn't want to know if he had moved back in with his parents. I told myself that his failure was inevitable and I didn't need a front row seat to watch the crash. I'd already seen the trailer. I didn't need to watch the movie. And it worked. The hustle culture of the city became my new boyfriend. 6 months post-breakup, I got my first promotion. A year later, I was managing my own team. My bank account started to look like the ones I used to envy. I bought the designer bags I used to stare at through the window. I started drinking distinct wines instead of the cheap stuff on sale. I was becoming the woman I had always nagged my ex to be worthy of. I was becoming powerful, but there was still a void, a quiet space in the passenger seat of my life. I told myself I didn't need anyone. I told myself I was an independent, modern woman who didn't need a man to validate her existence. Then I met David. If my ex was a messy, abstract painting, David was a perfectly drafted architectural blueprint. We met at a fintech conference in Chicago. He was wearing a navy bespoke suit that fit him perfectly. He was a director at a major tech giant, one of those companies that everyone knows, the kind that shapes the future. He approached me at the networking mixer. He didn't use a cheesy pickup line. He didn't talk about himself. He asked me about my take on the market trends for the upcoming quarter. He listened when I spoke, and when he looked at me, I didn't see a boy looking for a mother figure. I saw a man looking for an equal. Our first date was at a steakhouse where the menu didn't have prices. I reached for my purse when the bill came, a reflex, a scar from 5 years of carrying a deadbeat. David gently placed his hand over mine. His skin was warm, his grip firm. Put that away, Sneha, he said, looking me dead in the eye with a smile that was confident, not arrogant. You're with me? 3 words, but they hit me harder than any I love you ever could. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't the captain, the navigator, and the engine of the relationship. I could just be. I could relax. I could exhale. David was everything my ex wasn't. He was ambitious. He woke up at 5 a.m. to run 5 miles. He read the Wall Street Journal with his morning coffee. He had a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, and a retirement strategy. He was safe. He was secure. We move fast. When you're in your late 20s and you find someone who ticks every single box on your checklist, you don't play games. You lock it down. He proposed to me on a private boat in the Mediterranean. It was picture perfect. The sunset, the diamond ring that sparkled like a star. The way he got down on one knee without a moment of hesitation. As he slid that ring onto my finger, I felt a rush of triumph. I looked out at the ocean and in my mind, I spoke to my ex. I spoke to the ghost of the boy who wouldn't get off the couch. Look at me now, I thought. Look at what I have. Look at what you lost. You thought I was demanding. You thought I was too much. No, I just needed someone who could handle me, and I found him. We got married in a vineyard. It was the wedding of the year for our social circle. My parents were over the moon. Finally, their daughter had settled down with a winner. David was the son-in-law of their dreams. Life was good. Actually, life was perfect. We bought a beautiful house in the suburbs, a modern, sleek place with a double garage and a manicured lawn. We hosted dinner parties where we talked about real estate and stock options. I was happy. I was undeniably, visibly happy. But happiness in the corporate world is a moving target. You always want more. I was working at a mid-tier firm, doing well, but I felt I had hit a ceiling. I wanted the big leagues. I wanted the kind of job that makes people raise their eyebrows when you hand them your business card. And then the call came. A headhunter from one of the world's largest global investment banks contacted me. They were looking for a senior analyst. The package was insane. The signing bonus alone was more than my ex used to make in a year if he had worked. The office was in the most prestigious tower in the financial district. A glass needle piercing the clouds. I interviewed, I crushed it. They offered me the job on the spot. I remember the night I accepted the offer. David and I opened a bottle of Dom Perignon to celebrate. We toasted to our future, to our power couple status. You did it, babe, David said, kissing my forehead. I felt invincible. I felt like the main character in a movie where the hero overcomes the struggle and wins everything in the end. I had the handsome, successful husband. I had the dream house, and now I had the dream job. I thought about my ex one last time that night. It had been years since I even typed his name into a search bar. I felt a brief flicker of pity. Just a tiny spark. Poor guy. He never stood a chance against the world. And I was glad I got off that sinking ship before I drowned with him. The first day at the new job arrived. I woke up early, put on my sharpest blazer and checked myself in the mirror. I looked fierce. I looked ready for war. I kissed David goodbye and drove into the city, the skyline glittering in the morning sun. Walking into the lobby of that massive skyscraper felt like entering a temple of power. Men and women in expensive suits moved like currents of electricity. The air smelled of expensive coffee and ambition. I swiped my brand new security badge. Beep, and the turnstile opened. I belong here, I told myself. This is where I was always meant to be. I took the elevator up to the 40th floor. My ears popped as we ascended. The doors slid open to reveal a sprawling office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. It was breathtaking. My new boss, the managing director, greeted me. "Welcome aboard, Sneha," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "We're throwing you right into the deep end. There's a strategic merger meeting happening in conference room A right now. The VP is leading it." "Absolutely," I said, grabbing my notebook. I wasn't nervous. Why would I be? I had prepared for this moment my whole life. I walked down the long carpeted corridor, the sound of my heels muffled but confident. I reached conference room A. The heavy glass doors were frosted, so I couldn't see inside, but I could hear a voice, a deep, commanding voice. It sounded vaguely familiar, but I brushed it off. It had a resonance, an authority that commanded attention. It was the voice of someone who owned the room. I pushed the door open. The air conditioning in the room hit me first. Cold and sterile. Around the massive mahogany table sat 12 people, all focused intently on the figure standing at the head of the room. He was pointing at a projection screen, explaining a complex risk analysis model with the ease of someone reciting the alphabet. He was wearing a charcoal grey suit that must have cost $5,000. It was tailored to perfection, hugging broad shoulders and a lean, athletic frame. His hair was styled back, sharp and professional. On his wrist, a platinum Rolex caught the light from the projector. He turned around as the door clicked shut behind me, our eyes locked. The world didn't just stop, it evaporated. The air left my lungs in a violent rush, as if someone had punched me in the guts. My notebook almost slipped from my sweaty fingers. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought everyone in the room could hear it. It wasn't David, it wasn't a stranger. Standing there, looking like the cover of Forbes magazine, radiating power and confidence, was him. The boy who used to sleep until noon, the boy who borrowed money for cigarettes. He wasn't just in the room, he was leading it. He paused mid-sentence. His eyes, once so soft and aimless, were now piercing and sharp. For a split second, I saw a flicker of recognition, a tiny imperceptible widening of the pupils, but just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. He didn't gasp, he didn't stutter. He didn't look like a deer in headlights. Instead, he did something that chilled me to the bone. He smiled, not the goofy, lazy smile I remembered. This was a cool, calculated, corporate smile. A shark smile. "Please take a seat," he said. His voice was smooth, steady, and utterly unrecognisable from the whiny tone I had left behind. "We were just discussing the acquisition strategy." My mouth went dry. My brain was screaming, trying to reconcile the two images in my head. The loser on the couch and the titan in the boardroom. I croaked, my voice trembling. I cleared my throat, forcing myself to function. "Yes." "Welcome, Sneha," he said, holding my gaze for a second too long, a challenge burning in his eyes. "I'm the vice president of this division." He turned his back to me and continued his presentation without missing a beat. I sank into the nearest chair, my legs shaking uncontrollably under the table. I stared at his back. The straight spine, the confident posture. I'd spent 5 years building a life based on the certainty that I was the successful one, that I was the prize. I'd married a director. I'd bought the house. I'd won the breakup. But as I sat there watching the man I had thrown away command a room of millionaires, a terrifying thought clawed its way up my throat. I hadn't just left an anchor. I had let go of a rocket ship right before it took off. And now I was just a passenger in his world. The air in conference room A wasn't just cold, it was vacuum sealed. I sat there, paralysed, my pen hovering over a blank page of my notebook. The tip of the pen was trembling, creating a tiny jagged ink blot that spread like a bruise on the paper. Ryan. It was Ryan. My brain was misfiring, frantically trying to reject the visual data coming from my eyes. This had to be a hallucination, a stress-induced psychotic break. Maybe I had fallen asleep at the wheel on the way to work and this was some dying dream. Because the alternative, that the man standing 10 feet away from me, controlling the room with the grace of a seasoned predator, was the same man who used to eat cereal out of a mixing bowl because he was too lazy to wash a dish, was impossible. As you can see from the Q3 projections, his voice boomed, deep and resonant. The volatility in the Asian markets is actually an opportunity for leverage, not a reason to retreat. I stared at his mouth. That mouth used to complain about having to walk 3 blocks to the subway. Now it was uttering words like volatility, leverage, and aggressive. And he wasn't just saying them, he owned them. He moved around the room with a kinetic energy I had never seen before. He unbuttoned his suit jacket with one hand as he leaned over the table to emphasise a point. The movement was smooth, practised. The Ryan I knew would have tripped over the chair. This Ryan moved like water. The other executives in the room, men and women in their 40s and 50s, people who had been in this industry for decades, were nodding. They were taking notes. They were captivated. He has them, I realised with a jolt of horror. They respect him. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. I needed to leave. I needed to stand up, feign a coughing fit, and run out of that room before the walls closed in. But I was frozen. I was glued to the expensive ergonomic chair, trapped in the orbit of his gravity. For the next 45 minutes, I was forced to endure the torture of watching him be brilliant. He didn't look at me again, not once. After that initial split-second lock of eyes when I entered, he had erased me from his field of vision. To him, I was just another body in the room, another analyst to be managed. Was it a power play? Was he ignoring me on purpose to unsettle me? Or, and this thought was infinitely worse, did I matter so little to him now that my presence didn't even register as a disruption? All right, that's it for today, Ryan said, clapping his hands together once. The sound cracked through the room like a whip. I want the risk assessment reports on my desk by Friday morning. The room erupted into the shuffling of papers and the scraping of chairs. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. I grabbed my things, desperate to blend into the crowd and escape. Great presentation, Ryan, one of the senior directors said, patting him on the back as they walked out. Thanks, Bill, Ryan replied, flashing a charismatic, easy grin, doing the homework. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. I kept my head down, clutching my notebook to my chest like a shield, and practically sprinted toward the door. I made it into the corridor, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Left, go left, find the bathroom. I pushed through the heavy door of the ladies' restroom and locked myself in the furthest stall. I dropped my bag on the floor and leaned against the door, gasping for air. What the hell is happening? I closed my eyes and the image of him flashed in the darkness. The suit, the Rolex, the confidence. It wasn't just a makeover. It was a reincarnation. How? How does a man go from sleeping till noon to being a vice president at a global investment bank in 5 years? That kind of climb takes a decade minimum. It takes Ivy League connections, 80-hour work weeks, blood, sweat, and a killer instinct. The Ryan I knew didn't have a killer instinct. He didn't even have a survival instinct, unless I was the thing holding him back. The thought hit me like a physical slap. I sank down onto the toilet seat, burying my face in my hands. Was I the villain in his story? Was I the heavy anchor that, once cut loose, allowed him to soar? No, I whispered to the empty stall. No, he was lazy. He used me. I paid the bills. I was the victim. But here, in the cold light of this glass tower, the narrative I had told myself for 5 years was crumbling. I stayed in the bathroom for 20 minutes. I splashed cold water on my face, fixed my lipstick and forced myself to breathe. Get it together, Sneha. You are a professional. You are a senior analyst. You earned this job. He is just a co-worker. You can do this. I walked out of the bathroom, chin up, determined to find my desk and bury myself in spreadsheets. My cubicle was in the open plan section, surrounded by other analysts. It was a high-stress environment, phones ringing, Bloomberg terminals flashing. I found my desk, sat down and logged in. I looked up. A young woman with bright red lipstick and a headset around her neck was leaning over the partition. She looked friendly, the kind of office ally I would normally be grateful for. Yeah, I managed to smile. I'm Jessica. Welcome to the Shark Tank, she laughed. I saw you in the Monday morning meeting. My stomach tightened at the mention of his title. Yeah, it was. Jessica's eyes lit up. She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Intense is one word for it. Ryan is a machine. He's the youngest VP in the company's history. I felt the blood drain from my face. Yeah, he started here like 4 years ago, maybe 5. Climbed the ladder faster than anyone I've ever seen. The partners love him. She paused, then smirked. I forced a laugh, but it sounded brittle. I can see why. He seems capable. Honey, he's lethal, Jessica said, grabbing a stapler from my desk and playing with it. But don't get your hopes up. He's totally off the market. Married, kid, the whole white picket fence deal. He keeps his private life super locked down, though, like CIA level. No photos on his desk, nothing. Married folk kid, the words echoed in my head. So it wasn't just a career upgrade. He had replaced the life we were supposed to have too. He had found someone else, someone who presumably didn't nag him, didn't fight with him about money, someone who inspired him to become this. Anyway, Jessica said, straightening up, watch out for him. He's fair, but he doesn't tolerate incompetence. If you mess up, you're gone. He fired a guy last month for a typo in a client brief. She gave me a little wave and went back to her desk. Ruthless, I stared at my computer screen, the logging cursor blinking at me. Blink, 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 like a countdown. I tried to work. I really did. I opened the files the managing director had sent me. I started reading through the merger documents. But every time a door opened, every time a shadow passed my cubicle, my muscles tensed. I was waiting for him. I was waiting for the confrontation. Lunchtime came and went. I didn't eat. I couldn't. Around 2:00 p.m, I needed coffee to keep my hands from shaking. I walked to the break room kitchen, a sleek space with an espresso machine that probably cost more than my first car. I was stirring sugar into my cup, staring blankly at the Nespresso pods, when the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The chatter in the kitchen stopped. I turned around slowly. Ryan was standing in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his jacket anymore. His white dress shirt was crisp, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms that were defined and strong. He held a ceramic mug in one hand. There were 3 other people in the kitchen. They all straightened up, muttering polite, "Hello, Ryans." He nodded at them, a curt professional acknowledgement. Then he walked toward the coffee machine, toward me. My heart slammed against my throat. There was no escape. The counter was behind me, the espresso machine to my left. He was blocking the exit. He stepped up beside me. I could smell his cologne, something expensive, woody, with a hint of citrus. It was a far cry from the cheap body spray he used to drown himself in. He reached for a coffee pod. His arm brushed against my shoulder. An electric shock went through me, so sharp I almost dropped my spoon. He didn't pull away immediately. He lingered for a fraction of a second. "Excuse me," he said. His voice was low, intimate, yet distant. I looked up at him. I had to. He was looking down at me. His eyes were a piercing blue, cold as ice. There was no warmth in them. No nostalgia, no anger, just nothing. It was like looking at a stranger who vaguely resembled someone I once knew. "Hi," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He popped the pod into the machine and pressed the button. The machine whirred to life, filling the heavy silence. He asked, not looking at me, watching the dark liquid pour into his mug. He said my name like it was a word he had just learned. Sneha. Not babe, not Snay, just the name on my ID badge. "Yes," I said, gaining a tiny bit of strength from the sheer absurdity of his acting. I took a risk. I acknowledged the elephant in the room. I needed to know if he was going to play this game forever. He took his mug and turned to face me fully. He took a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes scanning my face with the indifference of an auditor. "Checking a receipt?" he asked. 2 words. But they were loaded with 5 years of silence. I stammered. I work everywhere to stay up, Fraley said calmly. This is my floor. He took a step closer. The other people in the kitchen had left, sensing the tension, or maybe just terrified of being near the boss. We were alone. Let me make one thing clear, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was sharper than a razor blade. I run a tight ship. I don't care about your resume. I don't care about where you came from. I care about results. Do your job and we won't have a problem. Bring any... He leaned in, his face inches from mine. For a second, I thought he might kiss me or strangle me. I stared at him, wide-eyed, trembling. This wasn't the boy I left. This was a monster I'd created. Yes, I breathed. Good, he said. He straightened up, the mask of the corporate executive sliding back into place perfectly. He turned on his heel and walked out, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen. The smell of his cologne lingering in the air like a ghost. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. My legs gave out and I slid down to the floor, clutching my cold coffee cup. He wasn't just my boss. He was my enemy. And the terrifying part wasn't that he hated me. It was that he had completely, utterly outgrown me. He had weaponized his heartbreak and turned it into an empire. I checked my watch. It was only 2:15 p.m. on my first day. I had to survive the rest of the week. But as I sat on the kitchen floor of the 40th story, I realised something else. The suspense wasn't about whether he would fire me. It was about what he was going to make me feel before he did. Because when he looked at me, I didn't see love. I didn't see hate. I saw a scoreboard and he was winning. My desk was positioned in what the office called the pit. The open plan rows of cubicles where the analysts and associates sat grinding out financial models until our eyes bled. From my seat, if I angled my chair just right, I had a direct line of sight into the corner offices, specifically his office. It was a massive, soundproof glass box that screamed authority, and for the next 3 days, that glass box became my personal cinema of torture. I couldn't stop watching him. It was a sickness. I tried to focus on the merger data for the Tokyo deal. I tried to listen to the podcast Jessica recommended, but my eyes kept drifting back to him like a magnet finding north. I watched the stranger in the suit. I call him a stranger because I couldn't reconcile the man behind that glass with the boy I used to know. The Ryan I lived with for 5 years was a man of soft edges. He wore baggy hoodies, had a permanent 3-day stubble, and moved with a lethargic shuffle, as if gravity pulled on him harder than it did on everyone else. He avoided conflict like it was a contagious disease. If a waiter got his order wrong, he'd eat the wrong food rather than speak up. If the landlord raised the rent, he'd just shrug and wait for me to negotiate. But the man in the fishbowl, he was made of sharp angles and steel. On Wednesday morning, I watched him fire someone. It wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming. I saw a senior associate, a guy in his 40s, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, walk into Ryan's office. I couldn't hear a word through the soundproof glass, but I didn't need to. I watched the body language. It was a masterclass in dominance. Ryan didn't stand up. He didn't offer the guy a seat. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steeped together, listening. The associate was waving his hands, pleading, sweating. Ryan just watched him. His face was a mask of absolute terrifying calm. Then Ryan spoke. He said something short, maybe 2 sentences. He didn't raise his voice. I could tell by the lack of tension in his neck. The associate stopped talking. His shoulders slumped. He nodded, turned around and walked out of the office looking like a ghost. He packed his box and was gone within the hour. Ryan, he didn't even watch the guy leave. He immediately picked up his phone, dialed a number and started laughing. Laughing! I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. Who was this cold-blooded operator? Later that afternoon, the floor went into chaos. The Federal Reserve had made a surprise announcement about interest rates and the market took a nosedive. The trading floor downstairs was screaming. Phones in our section were ringing off the hook. People were actually running down the corridors. I jumped. It was the managing director, Sarah. She looked frantic. We need the risk exposure report on the tech portfolio now. I'm not done with the cross-referencing, I stammered, my heart racing. I don't care. Print what you have and get in there. She shoved a file into my hands and pointed toward the fishbowl. My legs felt like lead. I walked toward his office, the noise of the panic fading into a dull roar in my ears. I knocked on the glass door. He didn't look up. He held up one finger, while keeping the phone pressed to his ear. "I understand the volatility, gentlemen," he said. His voice was smooth, commanding, cutting through the panic like a knife. "But if you pull out now, you realise the liquidity loss you're looking at. You're reacting to the noise, not the signal. Stay the course." He snapped his fingers at me. "Give me the file." I walked over and placed the folder on his desk. My hand was shaking. His hand was steady as a surgeon's. He flipped the folder open, scanning the data while still talking. He read faster than anyone I had ever seen. His eyes darted down the columns of numbers I had spent hours compiling. Then he paused. He covered the mouthpiece of the phone with his hand and looked up at me. His eyes were icy. "This projection," he whispered, tapping a specific cell on the spreadsheet. "It doesn't factor in the Asian market close," but I froze. No, I whispered. He didn't roll his eyes. He didn't sigh. He just grabbed a pen, slashed a red line through my entire calculation, and wrote a new number in the margin. He did the math in his head. "In 3 seconds. Go," he said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. He uncovered the phone. "Gentlemen, the adjusted risk is actually lower than we thought." I walked out of his office, feeling about 2 inches tall. I made it back to my desk and sank into my chair. I was trembling, not from fear, but from shock. The Ryan I knew couldn't calculate a tip at a restaurant without using the calculator on his phone. This man just corrected a complex derivative model in his head while managing a multi-million-dollar crisis. He's better than me, I realised. The thought was a bitter pill to swallow. He is smarter than me. He is faster than me. But the real blow, the one that knocked the wind out of me, came on Friday night. It was late. The sun had set hours ago, leaving the New York skyline glittering against the black sky. The office was mostly empty, save for the cleaning crew and a few die-hard workaholics. I was still there, punishing myself, double-checking every single cell in my spreadsheet so I wouldn't face his red pen again. I needed water. I got up and walked toward the kitchen. To get there, I had to pass his office. The lights in the fishbowl were dimmed. His desk lamp was on, casting a warm golden glow over the room. I slowed down, my footsteps silent on the plush carpet. He was still there. He wasn't working. He was sitting in his chair, swiveled away from his monitors, facing the window. He was looking out at the city lights. He was on the phone, but he wasn't wearing his headset. He was holding his cell phone to his ear, his posture relaxed, his feet resting on the ledge of the window. I shouldn't have stopped. I should have kept walking. But curiosity is a dangerous drug. I crept closer, hiding in the shadow of a pillar just outside his door. The door was cracked open a few inches. "I know, buddy," I heard him say. My breath hitched. His voice, it was different. The metallic corporate edge was gone. It was soft, warm. It was the voice I used to hear when he talked to his mother. "I know, I promised," he continued, a gentle laugh rumbling in his chest. "But Daddy is fighting the bad guys, remember?" He was talking to his child, he asked. A pause. Then his voice dropped an octave, becoming intimate, tender. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, as if someone had reached in and squeezed my heart. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know it's date night. I'll make it up to you. I promise. How about we go to that place in the Hamptons this weekend?" He listened for a moment. Then he smiled. I could hear the smile in his voice. "I love you too, Clara. You have no idea. You're my rock. Go to sleep. You're my rock." I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and sudden. He used to call me his rock. "Sneha, you're my rock," he would say when he was too depressed to get out of bed. But back then, being his rock meant being his crutch. It meant carrying him. Now, he was telling this woman, this Clara, that she was his rock. But he didn't need carrying. He was a titan. He was offering her weekends in the Hamptons, security, a father for her child. A husband who worked hard for their family. He hung up the phone. He sighed, a long, contented exhale. He stood up and stretched, his silhouette framed against the city lights. Then he walked over to his desk. From where I was standing, for the first time, I could see what was on his desk. He picked up a framed photograph that was facing him. He looked at it for a long moment, brushed his thumb over the glass and set it back down. I squinted. The light from the lamp hit the photo just right. It was a black and white professional portrait. A beautiful woman with laughing eyes holding a toddler. And Ryan, looking at them not with the dead eyes he gave me, but with a look of absolute consuming adoration. He grabbed his jacket, shrugged it on and adjusted his cuffs. He turned toward the door. I panicked. I tried to step back to retreat into the shadows, but my heel caught on the edge of the carpet. I stumbled, my hand hitting the wall with a dull thud. Ryan froze. He looked toward the door. His voice was back to being the vice president. Sharp, suspicious. I couldn't hide. I stepped into the light of the hallway. It's just me, I said, my voice shaking. Ryan stared at me. He stood in the doorway of his office, illuminated by the golden lamp, looking like a king in his castle. I stood in the hallway, clutching my empty water bottle, feeling like a peasant. He looked at my face. He must have seen the red rim of my eyes. He must have known I heard him. For a second, the mask slipped. Just a fraction. He looked at me with something that wasn't anger, and it wasn't indifference. It was pity. Go home, Sneha, he said softly. It's late. This industry... I wanted to ask him. I wanted to scream. How did you do this? Why couldn't you do this for me? Why was I the sacrifice? Ryan, I whispered. He knew what I was asking. He didn't pretend not to understand. He walked past me, stopping just for a second by my shoulder. He didn't look at me. He looked straight ahead, down the dark corridor. Because, he said, his voice low and devoid of emotion, you didn't want a partner, Sneha. You wanted a project. And I didn't want a mother. He walked away. I stood there frozen in the hallway as the elevator dinged and took him down to the street, down to his car, down to the life that should have been mine. You wanted a project. The words echoed in the empty office. I walked into his office. I knew I shouldn't. It was a violation, but I had to see. I walked up to his desk. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely breathe. I looked at the photo frame he had touched. The woman was gorgeous, blonde, elegant, soft. She looked like money. She looked like peace. But then my eyes drifted to the corner of the desk. There was a small leather-bound notebook. It was open. I looked at the page, but it wasn't notes about the merger. It wasn't stock prices. It was a list. At the top of the page, written in his handwriting, that messy scrawl I recognised from 1,000 grocery lists, was a header, the 5-year plan. And under it, the first item... checked off with a thick black line. 1. Prove her wrong. My blood ran cold. The room spun. Prove her wrong. He hadn't done this for himself. He hadn't done this for Clara. He hadn't done this for the kid. He had done this for me, or rather against me. I wasn't just a chapter in his past. I was the fuel. I was the architect of my own destruction. Every late night, every deal, every climb up the ladder, it was all spited. He didn't hate me. He was obsessed with me, or at least obsessed with the version of me that told him he was nothing. I backed out of the office, terrified. I thought the suspense was about whether he still loved me. I was wrong. The suspense was much darker. He had built this entire empire to drop it on my head. And the realisation hit me with the force of a train. He didn't just want to be my boss, he wanted to break me. I ran to the elevator, pressing the button frantically. I needed to get out, I needed to breathe. But as the doors closed, I saw my reflection in the metal. I looked successful. I looked put together. But inside I was already cracking. Because now I knew the truth. I wasn't fighting a stranger. I was fighting a ghost who had spent 5 years sharpening his knife, just waiting for me to walk through that door. The notebook burned a hole in my memory. Prove her wrong. 3 words, that was it. That was the fuel source for the rocket ship that was Ryan's life. For the next 2 days, I walked around the office like I was navigating a minefield. Every time I saw him, every time I heard his voice booming in the hallway, I felt a sick, twisted mixture of fear and validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining the tension. This was personal. I wasn't just an employee to him. I was the antagonist in his origin story. I tried to act normal. I buried myself in the Tokyo merger data. I drank too much coffee. I avoided the fishbowl at all costs. But the universe has a funny way of forcing collisions when you're trying desperately to swerve. The collision came in the form of a heavy, cream-coloured envelope on my desk. The annual Global Gala. It was the bank's biggest event of the year, a black-tie charity dinner at the Pierre Hotel. Partners, clients, executives and senior analysts were all mandated to attend. +1s were expected. That meant David was coming. My stomach did a somersault. Bringing David into Ryan's orbit felt dangerous. It felt like bringing a civilian into a war zone. David was kind. He was safe. He was soft. He had no idea that the man signing my paychecks was the same man who used to borrow money from me to buy weed. I wanted to call in sick. I wanted to fake a family emergency. But Jessica, the girl from the next cubicle, leaned over. She asked, eyes sparkling, "I heard Ryan is sitting at the main table. He's bringing his wife." He's bringing his wife. That sealed it. I couldn't hide. If I didn't go, it would look like cowardice. It would look like I was still affected by him. And if there was one thing I refused to give Ryan, especially after seeing that notebook, it was the satisfaction of knowing he still had power over me. "I'll be there," I told Jessica, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. Saturday night arrived with a vengeance. I spent 3 hours getting ready. This wasn't vanity, it was armour. I wore a floor-length emerald green gown that hugged every curve. Very curve, silk that felt like water against my skin. I wore heels that were dangerously high. I put on diamond earrings that David had bought me for our anniversary. When David saw me, he whistled. "Wow," he said, adjusting his tuxedo bow tie. "You look..." Lethal. Good. That was the goal. "You look handsome," I said, kissing his cheek. But as I looked at him, so steady, so predictable, I felt a pang of guilt. He was walking into a lion's den and he thought we were just going to a dinner party. The ballroom at the pier was suffocatingly opulent. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling. A jazz band played softly in the corner. Waiters in white gloves moved like ghosts through the crowd, offering champagne flutes. The air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. "This is impressive," David said, scanning the room. "No," I murmured, my eyes darting around, scanning for the shark. I saw him almost immediately. He was standing near the centre of the room, holding court. He wore a tuxedo that fit him as if he had been born in it. The black fabric absorbed the light, making him look sharper, darker. He was laughing at something a client said, his head thrown back, radiating that magnetic confidence that drew people in like moths to a flame. And next to him was her, Clara. She was even more beautiful than the photo. She wore a shimmering silver dress that made her look ethereal. She had one hand resting lightly on Ryan's arm, a gesture of easy, secure possession. She looked at him with total adoration, and he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. My heart hammered against my ribs. Don't look, don't engage. "Let's get a drink," I said to David, grabbing his arm a little too tightly. David asked, pointing, "The VP you told me about, we should go say hi." "No," I said quickly, "he looks busy for..." "Nonsense," David said, already moving. I was being dragged toward the cliff edge. There was no stopping it. Ryan saw us coming. His eyes locked onto mine first. For a split second, the smile vanished. His gaze raked over my green dress, my hair, my face. It was a cold, assessing look. Then his eyes shifted to David. The transformation was instant. The corporate mask slid back into place. "Sneha," Ryan said, his voice smooth as velvet. "Ryan," I nodded, my throat dry. "And this must be the husband," Ryan said, extending a hand toward David. "David," my husband said, shaking Ryan's hand firmly. "Nice to finally meet the legend." "I try," Ryan chuckled. The sound was rich, charming. "Sneha is a valuable addition to the team. Her analytics are..." "Meticulous." He made it sound like an insult. "Honey, this is my wife, Clara," Ryan said, turning to the silver angel beside him. Clara smiled, warm and genuine. "Hi, Sneha. Ryan has mentioned you. He said you joined the team recently." I felt like I was in a fever dream. "Ryan has mentioned you." What did he say? "Hey, honey, the girl who ruined my life and fueled my rise to power, just got hired as my subordinate." "Hi, Clara," I managed to say. "So do you. That green is stunning," she said. She was so nice. It made me want to scream. I wanted her to be a witch. I wanted her to be awful, but she was perfect. She was the upgrade. "So, David," Ryan said, turning his attention to my husband. "What do you do?" "Yeah, I'm a director at Nexus Systems," David said, puffing his chest out slightly. "Interesting," Ryan said. He didn't just pretend to listen. He encouraged. He asked David pointed, intelligent questions about his field. He made David feel important. I stood there watching my ex-boyfriend charm my husband. It was surreal. It was perverse. "You know," David said, laughing at something Ryan said, "we should grab golf sometime." I almost choked on my champagne. Ryan's eyes flickered to me. A tiny, cruel smirk played on his lips. I'd love that, David, Ryan said. Maybe next weekend? He's playing with me. He was inviting himself into my personal life, infiltrating my sanctuary. Sounds great, David said. If you'll excuse us, Ryan said, checking his Rolex, we need to say hello to the chairman. It was a pleasure, David. He nodded at me, a dismissive, kingly nod, and guided Clara away, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. I watched them leave. They moved in perfect sync, a golden couple floating above the rest of us. Great guy, David said, taking a sip of his drink. Really sharp. You're lucky to work for him, babe. I felt bile rise in my throat. Yeah. I'm going to run to the restroom, David said. He walked away, leaving me alone in the sea of tuxedos and gowns. I needed air. The room was spinning. The smell of the expensive food, the noise of the laughter. It was all too much. I pushed through the crowd and found the exit to the terrace. The terrace was empty. The cold night air hit my face, shocking my system. I walked to the stone railing and looked out at Central Park, dark and silent below. I gripped the cold stone, trying to steady my breathing, prove her wrong. He had done it. He had proved me wrong in every conceivable way. He was richer, more powerful, more charming, and seemingly happier. And he was rubbing my nose in it with a smile. The voice came from the shadows. I didn't turn around. I knew who it was. My body knew. The hair on my arm stood up. Ryan stepped up beside me. He didn't look at me. He leaned against the railing, mirroring my pose, looking out at the park. He held a glass of scotch in his hand. I asked, my voice tight. Mingling. She's better at the social game than I am, he said. We stood in silence for a long moment. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. David seems nice, Ryan said. He is, I snapped. Safe, Ryan corrected. He's safe. He plays by the rules. I turned to face him, anger flaring in my chest. Don't talk about him like that. Ryan turned his head slowly. His blue eyes were dark in the night, unreadable. I know you, Sneha, he said softly. And I know that 5 years ago you would have eaten a guy like David for breakfast. You hated safe. You wanted fire. I hissed, keeping my voice low so the people inside wouldn't hear. I wanted someone who got off the couch. And look at me now, Ryan said, spreading his arms. I got off the couch. I have the future, I demanded, tears of frustration stinging my eyes. I saw the notebook, Ryan. Is that what this is? Ryan laughed. It was a dry, humourless sound. He took a sip of his scotch. No, Sneha, not spite. Motivation. He took a step closer to me. The space between us shrank. I could smell the scotch on his breath mixed with the cold night air. You broke me, he whispered. That day you walked out, you didn't just leave. You decimated me. You looked at me like I was garbage, I argued. Maybe, he admitted, but I loved you. I would have died for you. I had to survive, I said, my voice shaking. And so did I, he countered. I realised something that day. I realised that love isn't unconditional. It's performance-based, especially for people like you. So I decided to perform. He leaned in, his face inches from mine. And the funny thing is, he murmured, his eyes searching mine. Now that I'm here, now that I'm the man you always wanted, you can't have me. I don't want you, I lied. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Ryan smirked. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was electric. I flinched, but I didn't pull away. He asked. You're bored, Sneha, Ryan said, his voice dropping to a seductive, dangerous whisper. You married David because he was the safe bet, because you were scared of getting burned again. But deep down, you miss the chaos. Stop it, I whispered. I saw the way you looked at me in the boardroom, he said relentlessly. I saw the way you looked at Clara. You're wondering, what if? You're delusional, I said, stepping back. I'm a winner, Ryan said coldly. And you're just an analyst. He finished his drink in one gulp and set the glass on the stone railing with a sharp clink. Get back inside, he commanded, and David is waiting. And Sneha, have that risk report on my desk by 8 a.m. Monday. He walked away. He walked back into the light and the warmth of the party, back to his perfect wife and his adoring crowd. I stayed on the terrace, shivering. He was right. God help me, he was right. I hated him. I feared him. But as I watched him walk away, the terrifying truth bubbled up from the depths of my soul. I wasn't just jealous of his success. I wasn't just angry about his manipulation. I was attracted to him. The monster I had created was infinitely more compelling than the safe man I had married. And that was the most dangerous realisation of all. I wiped my face, fixed my mask, and walked back inside to hold my husband's hand. But as I stood there smiling at people I didn't care about, I knew the war had just shifted ground. It wasn't just about my career anymore. It was about my soul. Ryan wasn't just trying to fire me. He was trying to seduce me into destroying my own life. He wanted me to blow up my marriage, my stability, everything I had built, just to prove that I was still the messy, unsatisfied girl who couldn't be happy. He wanted me to fall in love with him again, just so he could be the one to walk away this time. And looking at him across the room, catching his eye as he toasted with a glass of champagne, I was terrified that it might actually work. Monday morning didn't start with an alarm, it started with a panic attack. I woke up at 4:30 a.m, gasping for air, my sheets soaked in cold sweat. The dream was fading, but the after image was burned into my retinas. Ryan standing at the foot of my bed, holding a lighter, watching my house burn down while David slept peacefully inside. I rolled over. David was there, breathing deeply, his arm thrown carelessly over his eyes. He looked so innocent, so safe. I hated myself. I slipped out of bed, grabbed my laptop and went to the kitchen. I had 3 hours before I had to be at the office, which meant I had 3 hours to obsess over the risk report. I opened the file. It was perfect. I knew it was perfect. I had triple checked every decimal point, every projection, but perfect wasn't enough anymore. I needed it to be undeniable. I needed to wipe that smug, I win look off Ryan's face. I got to the office at 7 o'clock a.m. The building was a tomb. I walked past the fishbowl. It was empty. The absence of him was almost as heavy as his presence. I placed the bound report on the centre of his desk. Dead centre, perfectly aligned with the edge of the mahogany. Then the waiting game began. At 8:15 a.m, he walked in. I watched him from behind my monitor, peeking through the gap between two potted plants like a stalker. He hung up his coat. He sat down. He saw the report. My heart stopped. He picked it up. He didn't open it immediately. He just held it, tapping the cover with his index finger. Then he flipped it open. I held my breath for 20 minutes. I watched him read. I analysed every micro expression. Did he frown? Did he nod? Was that a grimace? Finally, he closed the folder. He picked up his phone and dialed my extension. Ring. I jumped, knocking my knee against the desk. I cleared my throat, composed my face and answered. "Oh, come in," he said. Click. I walked the 20 steps to his office. It felt like walking to the gallows. I opened the door and stepped inside. "Close it," he said, not looking up from his screen. I closed the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut severed me from the safety of the office floor. We were alone in the glass box. "I read the report," he said. I asked, my voice steady, though my hands were clenched behind my back. He swiveled his chair to face me. He looked tired, but in that rugged, handsome way that some men pull off effortlessly. His tie was loosened slightly. "It's adequate," he said. Adequate. The word hit me like a physical slap. Adequate is what you call a sandwich from a gas station. Adequate is a C+. I had given him A+ work. I repeated, unable to hide the sharpness in my tone. "The liquidity analysis alone took me all weekend." "It's competent, Sneha," he said, leaning back, his eyes bored. "But it lacks vision. You're playing it safe. You're hedging your bets on the Asian market because you're afraid of the volatility." He dropped the name like a grenade. "Leave my husband out of this," I snapped. Ryan smirked. "Touched a nerve. I'm just talking about risk profiles. You used to be a risk taker. Now? I'm protecting the bank's assets," I defended. "Your job is to make me money," he said, his voice dropping low. "And to make money, you have to be willing to bleed a little. Redo the projection." "That's reckless," I argued. "No," he said, locking eyes with me. "It's ambitious. There's a difference. Discern." He turned back to his screen, dismissing me. I walked out of his office, shaking with rage. But underneath the rage, there was something else. Adrenaline. Pure, unadulterated adrenaline. He was challenging me. He was pushing me off the ledge, daring me to fly. And God help me, I wanted to show him I could fly. I spent the rest of the day in a fugue state, tearing apart my own work and rebuilding it. I skipped lunch. I ignored texts from my friends. I was in the zone, that hyper-focused state I hadn't felt since college. At 6 o'clock p.m, my phone buzzed. It was David. David, hey honey, I picked up Thai food. Made sure to get the mild curry you like. See you soon. I looked at the text. Mild curry, safe, predictable, bland. Me still working. Don't wait up. I didn't go home until 9:30 p.m. When I walked in, the house was quiet. David was on the couch watching a documentary about bridges. He looked up and smiled, a soft, forgiving smile that made my stomach churn with guilt. Hey, stranger, he said, pausing the TV. You have no idea, I muttered, dropping my bag and kicking off my heels. My feet throbbed. I saved you some food, he said. I'm not hungry, I said, walking past him toward the bedroom. I just wanted to shower. I wanted to wash the office off me. David followed me. He leaned against the doorframe of the bathroom while I brushed my teeth. So he started, a little too casually. I froze, toothbrush in my mouth. I spat into the sink and rinsed, wiping my mouth slowly. I texted him about the golf game, David said, oblivious to the panic rising in my chest. We're on for Sunday. He's actually a really cool guy, Sneha. We texted back and forth for a bit, I asked, turning to face him. Yeah, just making conversation, David shrugged. He seems lonely, honestly. I know he's got the wife and kid, but he seems, I don't know. I felt a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat. Ryan didn't need a friend. He was gathering intel. He was casing the joint. He was infiltrating my safe zone. David, I said, my voice tight. I don't think you should be friends with my boss. It's, oh, come on, David laughed, walking over and wrapping his arms around my waist. Don't be so corporate. It's just golf. He kissed my neck. His lips were warm, soft. I flinched. It was involuntary, a physical rejection. David pulled back, looking hurt. He asked, I'm just tired, I lied, pulling away from him. Ryan is working me to the bone. Okay, David said quietly. Okay. He walked out of the room. I watched him go, feeling like a monster. He was a good man. He didn't deserve this, but as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I wasn't thinking about David's kindness. I was thinking about Ryan's cruelty. I was thinking about the way his eyes tracked me across the room. I was thinking about the notebook. Prove her wrong. He was winning the war. He wasn't just proving me wrong. He was proving that my entire life, this house, this husband, this safety was a lie. I had told myself to feel better about leaving him. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The week blurred into a series of high-stakes meetings and silent confrontations. Ryan rode me hard. He criticised my font choices. He questioned my data sources. He made me present in front of the managing directors with 10 minutes notice. But I rose to the occasion. I stopped being afraid. I started fighting back. When he questioned my numbers in a team meeting, I interrupted him. Actually, Ryan, I said, my voice ringing out in the crowded conference room. If you look at page 4, you'll see I adjusted for the inflation index. My numbers aren't wrong. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Nobody interrupted Ryan. Nobody corrected him. Ryan looked at me. For a second, his eyes narrowed. Then slowly, the corner of his mouth twitched up. Fair point, he said. It was a victory, a tiny, intoxicating victory. After the meeting, I was packing up my laptop when he walked by my chair. He didn't stop, but he leaned down, his breath ghosting against my ear. Better, he whispered. I shivered. It wasn't fear, it was arousal. And realising that terrified me more than anything else. Friday arrived, the breaking point. It was 5 o'clock p.m. The office was emptying out for the weekend. I was packing my bag, looking forward to 2 days of not seeing his face. 2 days of trying to repair the damage I was doing to my marriage. Sneha, my office. Ryan stood in his doorway, sleeves rolled up, looking stressed. I sighed and walked over. What is it, Ryan? Close the door, he said. I did. I sat. We have a problem, he said, pacing behind his desk. The London merger. The due diligence team found a discrepancy in the asset valuation. It's a mess. Okay, I said. So we work the weekend. It's not that simple, Stone, he said, stopping and looking at me. The files are physical. They're in the London vault. Okay, I said slowly. I am, he said. I'm going. Okay, I said again, wondering why he was telling me this. You're coming with me, he said. The air left the room. You're the lead analyst on this deal, Sneha. You know the numbers better than anyone. I need you there to cross-reference the data while I handle the partners. Go home, pack a bag. I can't, I blurted out. He asked, his voice cool, professional. It's inappropriate, I stammered. Just the two of us on a private jet? Ryan laughed. He walked around the desk and leaned against the front of it, crossing his arms. He raised an eyebrow. Sneha, we are colleagues, professionals, unless... I trust myself fine, I lied, my face burning. It's David! It's his birthday on Sunday. Ryan's expression hardened. This deal is worth $4 billion. My bonus and yours depends on it. If you want to stay home and bake a cake for David, fine. But don't expect to be on the fast track here anymore. You want to be a VP one day. This is what it takes. He stared at me. It was a challenge. It was a trap. If I said no, I was choosing safety. I was choosing David. I was proving that I was just a suburban housewife playing at a career. If I said yes, I was walking into the fire. I thought about David. I thought about his mild curry and his documentaries about bridges. I thought about the predictable, safe, boring life stretching out in front of me for the next 40 years. Then I looked at Ryan, the architect of chaos, the man who made my blood run hot and cold at the same time. I need an hour to pack, I said. Ryan didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just nodded. Car will pick you up at 6:30, he said. I walked out of the office. My hands were shaking. I grabbed my phone and dialed David. David answered on the first ring. I was just about to leave work. My voice cracked. I can't. Something came up, a crisis with the London deal. David sounded stunned. But, Sneha, it's my birthday weekend. I know, I said, closing my eyes. I'm so sorry. It's Ryan. He's making me go. It's mandatory? David asked. His voice was different now. The trust was starting to fracture. It's a team trip, I lied. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Okay, David said finally. His voice sounded so defeated. Be safe. Love you too, I whispered and hung up. I stood in the lobby of the building, watching the rain start to fall against the glass. I was lying to my husband. I was prioritising my ex-boyfriend. I was getting on a plane to cross the Atlantic with the one man who had the power to destroy me. I wasn't just crossing a line, I was erasing it. I went home, threw clothes into a suitcase like a madwoman, and was waiting on the curb when the black town car pulled up. The driver opened the door. I slid into the back seat. Ryan was already there. He was wearing a casual cashmere sweater and dark jeans. He held 2 crystal tumblers of scotch. As the car pulled away from the curb, heading toward the airfield, he handed me a glass. To the London deal, he said, clinking his glass against mine. I took a sip. The liquid burned going down. You lied to him, Ryan said softly, looking out the window. I asked. You told David it was a team trip, he said. I felt exposed. Naked, I asked defensively. Ryan turned to look at me. The streetlights flickered over his face, casting shadows in the hollows of his cheeks. Because, he said. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving mine. He added, his voice a low rumble. You didn't pack for a business trip. You packed the red dress. My breath hitched. He was right. I had packed the dress I wore on our anniversary 3 years ago, the dress he used to love. I don't know what you're talking about, I whispered. We have 7 hours in the air, Ryan said, leaning back and closing his eyes. You can lie to David. You can lie to yourself. The car sped up, merging onto the highway, carrying us away from the city, away from my marriage, and straight into the eye of the storm. I took another drink. I had a feeling I was going to need the whole bottle. The unspoken war was over. The real war had just begun. The hum of a Gulfstream G650 at 40,000 feet is a specific kind of silence. It's money, it's isolation, it's the sound of being untouchable. For the first 2 hours of the flight, Ryan didn't speak. He sat across from me in the cream-coloured leather captain's chair, his laptop open, typing furiously. The cabin was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the reading lights and the blue hue of the screens. I sat there, nursing my third scotch, watching him. He knew I was watching. Every now and then he would reach for his glass and the platinum Rolex on his wrist would catch the light. A flash of brilliance in the dark. It was hypnotic. Stop thinking so loud, he said, not looking up from his keyboard. I swirled the amber liquid in my glass. I'm not thinking. He finally stopped typing. He closed the laptop with a soft snap and swiveled his chair to face me. "For you to tell me what this is really about," I said. Ryan studied me. His face was a mask of calm, but his eyes were burning with that same intensity I saw in the boardroom. "There is a discrepancy," he said, "but we could have fixed it over Zoom," I whispered. Ryan stood up. In the confined space of the jet, he loomed over me. He walked to the small bar, poured himself another drink, and then leaned against the fuselage, staring down at me. "Because I needed to see if you would do it," he said softly. "Choose, lad," he said. "I needed to see if you would choose the safe, comfortable life you built with the Bridge documentary guy, or if you would choose the risk." "I didn't choose you," I argued, my voice shaking. "You forced me." Ryan laughed. It was a dark, low sound. "Sneha, please, you're a senior analyst at a top-tier bank. You could have said no. You could have called HR. You could have quit, but you didn't. You packed the red dress." He took a step closer, invading my personal space. I could smell the expensive scotch and the sandalwood of his cologne. "You got in the car because you wanted to know," he whispered. "You wanted to know if the spark was still there." I wanted to slap him. I wanted to scream. But more than anything, I wanted him to be right. "You're cruel," I breathed. "I'm honest," he countered. He knelt down. He actually knelt on the floor of the jet so that his face was level with mine. He placed his hands on the armrests of my chair, trapping me. He asked. "Yes," I said. "It came out too fast, too defensive." I hesitated, just for a microsecond, but that hesitation was a scream. Ryan smirked. He didn't need me to answer. He stood up, satisfied. "Get some sleep, Sneha. We land in 4 hours." He went back to his seat, put on noise-cancelling headphones and closed his eyes. I didn't sleep. I stared out the window at the black void of the Atlantic Ocean, wondering if I was flying toward my destiny or my doom. London was grey. The rain was falling in sheets as the car navigated the slick streets toward the Shard. We weren't staying at a normal hotel. We were staying at the Shangri-La. Ryan had booked the penthouse suite. Of course he had. 2 bedrooms, he told the concierge, not even looking at me. We took the elevator up to the 52nd floor. The doors opened to a view that stole the breath from my lungs. All of London lay spread out beneath us, glittering through the rain like a jewelled map. "Get changed," Ryan said, checking his watch. "We have dinner with the partners at 8 o'clock. I went into my room. It was luxurious, filled with orchids and silk. I took a shower, trying to scrub away the guilt that was clinging to my skin like a film. But as I dried off and looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see a guilty wife. I saw a woman who was alive. I put on the red dress. It was backless, bold and dangerous. I applied my lipstick, a deep crimson. I put on my heels. When I walked out into the shared living area of the suite, Ryan was waiting. He was wearing a black tuxedo, bow tie undone, hanging loose around his neck. He was pouring 2 glasses of champagne. He turned when he heard my heels on the marble floor. He stopped. His eyes travelled up from my shoes, over the curve of my hips, to my bare shoulders, and finally to my eyes. For a moment, the corporate shark was gone. I saw the boy I used to know. I saw the hunger. I saw the pain. He cleared his voice rough. He handed me a glass. His fingers brushed mine. The electricity was undeniable. It crackled between us, hot and heavy. He asked. The dinner was a blur. I smiled. I shook hands. I discussed asset valuations and risk corridors. The partners were charmed. They loved the dynamic between Ryan and me. They thought we were a well-oiled machine. They had no idea that under the table, my leg was pressing against his. They had no idea that every time Ryan looked at me, he was stripping me bare. By the time we got back to the hotel, it was midnight. The rain had stopped, leaving the city lights to reflect off the wet pavement. We rode the elevator up in silence. The tension was suffocating. My heart was hammering, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This is it, I thought. This is the moment. I'm going to cheat on my husband. I'm going to blow up my life, and I don't care. We walked into the suite. Ryan loosened his tie and threw his jacket on the sofa. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the Thames. "Ryan," I said softly. He didn't turn around. I walked over to him. I stopped just inches behind his back. I could feel the heat radiating off him. "You were right," I whispered. He remained silent. "I didn't leave because of the money," I confessed, the words tumbling out of me. "I mean, it started with the money, but the truth is I left because I was scared. I was scared that you would never change. And I was scared that if I stayed, I would become ordinary. I wanted a guarantee. David, Ryan asked, still looking at the city? Now I realise that a guarantee is just another word for a cage, I said, reaching out to touch his back. My hand rested on his white dress shirt, feeling the muscle underneath. I missed you, Ryan. I missed the fire. He turned around slowly. His face was unreadable. He looked at my hand on his chest, then up to my eyes. He repeated, Sneha, there is no us. We can start over, I pleaded, stepping closer, tilting my head up. You brought me here for a reason. You kept the notebook. You checked the boxes. Ryan looked at me, and then he did something that broke me more than any shout or insult could have. He took my hand gently, lifted it off his chest and let it drop. I didn't build this for you, Sneha, he said, his voice calm, steady and utterly devastating. I built it because of you. And I stepped back, confused. When you left, Whiteley said, walking over to the minibar and grabbing a bottle of water, I wanted to die. I really did. I felt worthless. You were right. I was a loser. I was a drain on you. But then I got angry. I decided I was going to become the man you said I couldn't be. I worked 80-hour weeks. I kissed arse. I learnt the game. He took a sip of water and looked at me with clear, cold eyes. And when I got to the top, I looked around for you. I wanted to show you. I wanted to say, look, I did it. I am, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. But then I met Clara, he said. The name hung in the air like smoke. Clara didn't need me to prove anything, Ryan said, his voice softening. She didn't care about the VP title. She didn't care about the money. She loved me when I was a stressed out junior associate on the verge of a breakdown. He walked back over to me, standing close but not touching. You asked why I brought you here, but he said, you think I brought you here to sleep with you? I asked, a tear rolling down my cheek. Oh no, Ryan said, for I froze. I needed to know, he said. I needed to know if I was still holding on to you. If the ghost of Sneha was still haunting my marriage. I needed to see if when we were alone in a room with the door open and the champagne poured. He looked at me with a sad final smile. I choked out. And I don't, he said. The words were a physical blow. They hit me in the chest, knocking the wind out of me. I look at you now, Ryan continued, his voice gentle but firm. And I don't see the love of my life. I see a woman who is lost. I see a woman who treats people like investments. You traded me in when my stock was low. You bought David because he was a safe bond. He shook his head. That's not love, Snare. That's business. So he walked past me toward the door of his bedroom. Ryan, please, I sobbed, turning to face him. Don't do this. Don't leave me like this. I can change. Ryan stopped at the door. He didn't turn around. Go home to your husband, Sneha, he said. He's a good man. He loves you. Try to be worthy of that, because you and we were a lesson. I cried out. The list! Ryan glanced back over his shoulder. I did, he said. I proved that I didn't need you to be successful. And tonight, I proved that you aren't the woman I thought you were. You were willing to betray your husband for a ghost. He stepped into his room and closed the door. Click. The sound of the lock turning was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I stood alone in the middle of the penthouse suite in my beautiful red dress, surrounded by the lights of London. I had come here to find a climax. I had come here for passion, for rage, for something real. Instead, I got the truth. I wasn't the heroine of this story. I wasn't even the villain. I was just the backstory. The flight back to New York was silent. Ryan worked on his laptop. He was polite, professional, distant. He asked me if I wanted coffee. He asked if the temperature was okay. He treated me like exactly what I was, an employee. When we landed at Teterboro, the town car dropped him off first. Clara was waiting for him in the driveway of their beautiful suburban home. I watched through the tinted window as he got out. I saw his daughter run across the lawn and jump into his arms. I saw him spin her around, laughing. I saw Clara kiss him. A deep, welcoming kiss. He looked happy. He looked whole. The car pulled away, taking me back to my life. I walked into my house. It was quiet. David was in the kitchen making coffee. It was Sunday morning, he exclaimed, turning around. His face lit up with relief. You're back. How was the trip? I looked at him. I looked at the safe man I had married. The man who had spent his birthday alone because I was chasing a fantasy. I felt a hollow ache in my chest that I knew would never fully go away. Yeah, I lied, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. David hugged me. He smelled like laundry detergent and toast. It was a good smell, a safe smell. I missed you, he mumbled into my hair. I missed you too, I said, and in a way I meant it. I missed the simplicity. I missed the ignorance. I would stay with David. I would be a good wife. I would work hard. I would eventually get promoted, maybe even become a VP myself one day. But every time I walked into a boardroom, every time I saw a man in a charcoal suit, every time I saw a handwritten list, I would remember that I held a diamond in my hand, mistook it for a rock and threw it into the ocean. And now I had to watch it shine from the shore, forever out of reach. Some people come into your life to love you. Some come to teach you how to love. And some come to teach you that you don't know what love is until it's gone. Ryan was my lesson, and I was just his motivation.